All right.
Okay. We had a long Mishnah last time, Mishnah 8, Mishnah Chet in our edition, where there were all kinds of things that if you try to aggrandize yourself in different kinds of ways that are basically about physical, material accomplishments, Hillel says, forget about it. But then if you try to increase your wisdom, if you try to increase your generosity, your concern for other people, tzedakah, then that will be something that will not only benefit you, but benefit everybody, right? More life, more wisdom, more understanding, more peace. What a beautiful set of accomplishments if a person could do all of those things. And in the end, the final punchline is that there are things that you can acquire for yourself. If you lead a reputable life, if people see that you've done deeds, works of integrity, of honesty, and of goodness, then you'll be able to have that for yourself. But studying Torah, if you acquire words of Torah, then you acquire for yourself eternal life. Then it's not just how people think about you in this finite realm, but you enter into the realm of eternity, the coming world, the world that never stops. So unless somebody has some other reflections on that Mishnah, we'll go to the next Mishnah, which takes us to another teacher and to another set of sages. Okay, then we're on Mishnah Tet. So we'll start, as we always do, with our more common set of translations, and then we'll avail ourselves of the alternative that Rabbi Shapiro offers us many times. Okay, so Mishnah Tet is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Okay, Geraldine, go.
In my text, it's Mishnah 9.
That's what did I say?
You
I
said
have it. I have Mishnah 9 also. We
Okay.
finished Mishnah 8, and now we're on Mishnah 9.
Okay. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai received the tradition from Hillel and Shammai. This was a favorite teaching of his. If you have studied much Torah, take no special credit for it, since you were created for this very purpose.
Okay, so that's an encouraging statement. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived in the 1st century CE, and he is the hero in many ways of saving Judaism. He was trapped in Jerusalem during the siege of Jerusalem in 69 and 70. And Jerusalem was besieged on the outside by the Roman armies, and it was besieged on the inside by Jewish extremists. The Roman siege was, at least they said, all about, pushing us to surrender. And the assurances, according at least to Josephus, some people don't want to believe him, but was that had we surrendered, the temple would have been allowed to stand, and we would have obviously been still, a subject state of the Roman Empire, but under their control, under their supervision. But nevertheless, we would have had the temple intact, and we would have been allowed to continue practicing Judaism as long as it was a practice that would not be perceived as being rebellious in any way. the zealots, as they were called, the Kanaim, the zealots that were the Jewish nationalist extremists, they terrorized the Jewish population from the inside. And they made sure that the party of Jews that was willing to sue for peace and to surrender to the Romans would not be able to do so. So in many ways, they destroyed the temple. And Yochanan ben Zakkai was in Jerusalem, and this is one of the classic stories in the Talmud that we look at many times when we get to Tisha B'Av. He had to get smuggled out of Jerusalem. They spread a rumor that he died, and he was smuggled out in a coffin to be buried outside of Jerusalem. And when he got outside of Jerusalem, then he was able to go to the Roman general Vespasian, and he, to cut the story short and simple, he negotiates with the Romans that you do what you need to do, what you have to do, but give me a safe haven. Tein li Yavne v'chachameha. Give me Yavne, Jamnia is sometimes the way it's translated into English. Give me Yavne and her sages. And he establishes the Sanhedrin outside of Jerusalem. The whole time it was in Jerusalem. And he establishes an alternative rabbinic community in Yavne. Yavne is in the south near Ashdod. And there's a kibbutz there, there's a yeshiva there. I studied in that yeshiva in Israel for a year. And Kerem B'Yavne, it's called, the Vineyard of Yavne. And that's where he had his sages meeting. And they saved Judaism, because otherwise it would have been completely decimated, wiped out. Thanks to, again, from one perspective, the intransigence of the Jewish extremists who believed, as they eventually did at Masada, that it's better to die than to surrender, right? Better to commit suicide and kill ourselves than to live under Roman rule. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai steps up at that moment and does this very extraordinary act. He is as we see here, a student of Hillel, but he's not from Hillel's family. So eventually he will actually step down, and the teachers that we've mentioned before, Rabban Gamliel, who was Hillel's grandson, he becomes the head, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is moves aside, is pushed to the side. But for a brief shining moment, he is the leader of the Jewish people who establishes that either we study Torah or we die. Either we try to follow this nascent culture that takes the focus off the temple and puts it on Torah study and Torah and performance of mitzvot for everybody. Either we do that, or the Jewish people will be destroyed. So he's a key figure in Jewish history. So now he says something the opposite, sort of, right? And now we get also to Rabbi Shapiro's translation. Bill, how about it? You want to read that for us, please?
Sure. It's actually very, 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 very close. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai received transmission from Hillel and Shammai. He used to say, "Take no credit for your wisdom. Becoming wise is the reason you were born." Okay.
So the Hebrew al tachzik tova le'atzmacha, don't consider this a good thing of your own. Don't think that this is something that reflects well on you. This is what you were created for. What's the this? So Rabbi Shapiro says specifically, what's this? What were we created for? What?
Becoming wise.
Becoming wise, right? So he sort of a little bit, again, universalizes the terms. The most direct translation is, you were created to study Torah. We were created to learn Torah. Yes, Sarita, it looks like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, so the way I'm interpreting this is just there are certain things that you're supposed to do, and if you do those things, don't be boastful. It's kind of like you're for doing your job, right? It's only when you go above and beyond what your job is that that then maybe you have then you can boast, right, and say you did something extraordinary. But right, he's saying this should not be extraordinary. This should just be our job, or the job as Jews. Yeah.
Right. So when I think about, so we were created for certain things. So, giraffes, I saw a picture of giraffes this morning. So giraffes were created to eat the tops of trees and then to have more giraffes. That's what they were created for, right? As far as we can tell. They do that, right? They eat the tops of trees. They have more giraffes. Do they think, look at that? Look at what we just did. We did this amazing, surprising, inspiring thing. That's what they were created for. Ants.
Only a giraffe with a much higher neck who can get higher and reach higher than any other giraffe. That's the giraffe who can boast.
Well, but they just have a higher neck. So they were created with a higher neck. The ants that go running around, doing amazing things as far as we're concerned, they don't, write their memoirs, about I was the greatest ant of the anthill, look at what I did. They do what they're supposed to do. So what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying in this kind of backhanded way is what he saved the Jewish people for. He said, this is our raison d'etre, literally. This is the reason we exist, is to study Torah. And it's not a big deal. It's just the only deal. It's like, I breathed today. Wow, good for you. I mean, which actually would be a pretty good accomplishment if for some reason people were stopping you from breathing or circumstances were getting in the way. You can certainly be grateful that you were able to start breathing again. But it's not some extraordinary accomplishment. What would be then for Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai an extraordinary accomplishment? Like Sarita said, well, if you had a longer neck, you could boast as a giraffe. What would be? Is there anything that we as human beings, as Jews, is there anything that we could say, wow, boy, I deserve a lot of credit for this because I did X, Y, or Z? Is there anything that we could do that for? Josie, oh, now you're frozen.
There is one exception to what I've done is not so exceptional that Lou and Sarita will discover. And that's when you have grandchildren. You act like you're the only person in the world who's reached this wonderful milestone.
All right. So yeah, to see that you had part in making another good piece of life, which of course, look back at what Hillel said. Hillel said, the more Torah, the more life. There are many ways to increase life in the world. There are many ways to increase the goodness that life is in this world. But a little baby grandchild is certainly a super sweet way to feel that. I mean, I think at offhand, I would say in the end, what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai would claim is there is nothing. There is nothing that any person could say, wow, look at how great I am because I did this thing. Because if you did it, that's what you were created to do. Obviously, he's not talking about terrible things. You weren't created to do bad things. But all the good things that we can do are things that we discover that we were put here to do. This is in one way to explain the first verse of the first paragraph of the Shema. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your me'od. Chol me'odecha. And we translate it as might a lot of times. I don't know, it would be interesting to see what Rabbi Shapiro would do with that verse. But what does that mean? Love God, your whole heart and soul. So what's added by saying might? If you love God with your whole heart and soul, that sounds pretty extreme to me. It sounds pretty good. So some people explain that that might that we're talking about is, or as one rabbi explained it, Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg, he said, the word ma'od means very, right? Tov ma'od, very good. Ma'od is the veryness of yourself. What's the thing that sticks out about you when compared to other people? This person is very tall. This giraffe has a taller neck than anybody else, right? Or this person runs faster than anybody else. Or this person understands physics better than anybody else. Or this person is more compassionate than a lot of other people. They're very, that's the very part. The very is when you have kind of like a basic baseline of how people could be, and then you have a particular gift. And then what this verse is then saying is, love God with all your heart and soul, and whatever that extra that God gave you, give it to God, right? Give that as a gift back to God with love. God gave you that gift with love. So then acknowledge that and use it also for that purpose. So in whatever talent you have and whatever opportunity that you have, that is an extraordinary opportunity. Yochanan ben Zakkai may not have been the smartest of all the rabbis, but he had a moment that put him in a place that he was able to, get out and figure out a strategy for the sake of God and for the sake of the Jewish people. He used his shrewdness, he used his dedication for that purpose. If you're, like I say, if you're talented in any kind of way, that talent, understand that it is something to enhance the world on behalf of God. That would be one way to understand it. And then you can say, okay, so, I merited to have this particular unique quality. And now am I using it for the right purpose? Am I using it as well and as fully for the in the direction that it should be? Yeah, Sarita.
So I'm trying to think about this verse in relation to the previous one. He who has acquired a good name is acquired for himself. He was acquired for.
Technically, it's not a verse; it's a mishnah. A verse,
Mishnah, right?
In scripture, yeah.
Okay. He who has acquired a good name is acquired for himself. He who has acquired a good name, acquired for himself words of Torah, has acquired for himself life in the world to come. So I'm like thinking, okay, so what, if it's sort of like a base thing that all of us should be studying Torah, then why this statement that if you acquire words for Torah, you have acquired for yourself life in the world to come? So I'm trying to think about that. So what is that? Is that like, okay, if you're hesitant to do it, you should do it because one, we're supposed to, right? Which is Mishnah 9, but also there's sort of this reward. But then I don't know. I'm just finding it hard to reconcile why those two statements then? Why the need for both of those statements?
So one contrast that exists in Hillel's statement, Hillel's previous statement, is recognition or not. Kana Shem Tov is you are recognized as being good, as being smart, as being successful, as being whatever, right? Kana Shem Tov means you've acquired a good reputation. So that's a social reality where you are acknowledged by other people. Kanalo divrei Torah, if you have acquired words of Torah, there's no guarantee or no expectation even that anybody else will know that. It's not an outward I'm not acquiring this to be celebrated. I'm not acquiring this to be put on a pedestal. I'm not acquiring this to be, have a good reputation. I'm acquiring this because this is what life is about. To that extent, it's very much in line with what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying. God created us not to extinguish ourselves, not to distinguish ourselves, and not to extinguish ourselves. God didn't create us so that we would lose our eternal life. God infused God's being into each and every one of us, right? That's the creation story. We're just a clump of clay, and then God comes down and physically, the way the Torah presents it, comes over, bends over, mouth to mouth resuscitation. Only it's not resuscitation, it's suscitation. It's like God gives us life from God's own breathing. God doesn't do that in order for us to snuff it back out again. So yes, our physical existence is finite, but our eternal existence is there for us to grab if we take the godliness that was given to us and run with it. So that's where both of these statements, I think, feed into each other. Hillel is saying this is what it's all about, and Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying don't be fooled, don't make this into an ego thing. This is why we're alive. And his claim for the Jewish people, of course, is a very strong claim that not everybody buys. If we talk about Jewish identity today, there were the Pew survey. I don't know if anybody saw this, being discussed in certainly in the Jewish media. Every few years, we take our temperature as an American Jewish community, and how many people identify as Jews, how many people do this, how many people believe this. And we know this, we've talked about it many, many times. Jewish people are all over the map in what they believe and what they practice and what they think is important. We just had a thing in Bloomfield. I don't know if anybody knows about what this was. The Bloomfield School District decided that their school calendar for this coming year would begin on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. And so I joined with the rabbis in Bnei Keshet and in Ner Tamid, who actually have Bloomfield families with kids in the school system. As it happens right at this moment, we don't, as far as I know, but we have people that are there, but not with school-age kids. And we petitioned the school board to change it. But some people were writing, I remember when I was in college and I had a class and I had, a class that was on Yom Kippur. And my professor said to me, I'm Jewish and I'm teaching, and that's not my job to accommodate your religious beliefs. So for that person, there was no contradiction between being Jewish and coming to work on Yom Kippur. So what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says when he says you were created to study Torah, and it doesn't just mean intellectually, but to study Torah, to engage in Torah, to live Torah, that's what you were created for as a Jew. That's a controversial statement, or it's a meaningless statement for many, many Jews. Right? It's a very specific way of looking at who we are. Josie, and then we're going to conclude for today.
What happened with the Bloomfield school system?
So they backed down. Thankfully, they changed it. They didn't start the first day. I think they're starting the second day. This happened a few years ago in Montclair also.
I heard that.
And Columbia initially started their university schedule this coming year on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and then they backed down.
We had that at Montclair State a few years ago. And notably this year, whereas classes usually start after Labor Day, this year they're starting the week before on that Thursday, rather than we always start the Wednesday after Labor Day. And my guess is that was done so that the first day wouldn't be on Rosh Hashanah. Of course, that means for many classes, I have classes that would have met the first day of, or the second day of Rosh Hashanah that I already have to notify students
Right.
or cancel.
Right.
So, yeah.
But
yeah.
It takes
that's-
away a little bit of the edge, right? There's always
Yes.
going to be a conflict. They're not going to give every single
Right.
Jewish holiday off, but that first day quality of
Yeah.
school at least is taken off the table. All right, Zaygas into everybody. Yasher koach.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Yasha